because I think that nonprofit employees should be the smartest people in the world.
Yes.
And they're working on the most important problems.
Will, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited too because it's funny. You started out building furniture and now you have a tech platform, and that seems like a crazy transition. So I'd love to talk about how you got from there to where you are today.
Well, that's life. It seems like it's all one crazy journey. But yeah, so my brother and I started a furniture company when I was 17 at the end of high school. I will say my brother is a general contractor and home builder. So he clearly had a little bit more of a skill set. I did a little bit more of the business side, but we really just wanted to start something and work together, which was a super...
You were doing the business stuff at 17?
Well, business stuff for a custom furniture company. I mean, it was really meeting with friends and family, and it was all custom. So it was a lot of fun stuff of sitting down, figuring out what kind of coffee table you wanted, what kind of dining table you wanted, and putting together some of those things. And then the more of, I mean, honestly, at that time, it was almost like play, marketing campaigns, things like that, website design. I mean, really, that was where I think the start of all of this business stuff that I've been doing started, just because I thought that it was fun at that time, and it made it almost like a game, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that clearly checks out for your personality type, that for you, like the marketing and the business plan stuff is like your idea of play. I think that really lends itself to your personality.
I will take that as a compliment, I guess.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
so sure.
So we started that when I was 17, and he's a little bit older than me. So we did that for about 2 years, and it was a lot of fun, a really good learning experience. And some of the best advice that I always give to starting entrepreneurs is to start something super simple, super low budget. My family, I mean, again, we're the kind of family, we've never hired anyone to do anything. So we have all the tools, we had the space in the garage to do this, and it was super cheap and easy. And again, fun. So once we had our stint in furniture, I graduated high school, went into college, started studying entrepreneurship because by then I had gotten the bug and knew that this was what I wanted to do, and then went into real estate. And I don't know how far you want me to go down this path, but went into real estate, was there for 4 years, started a real estate firm, spent some time in New York, and came back, and I'm now running a nonprofit. So I'll pass that to you as to what questions you want to dive into from there.
Yeah, because I feel like, so you're 18 and you're in college, and I feel like most people are like, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, and they're spending a lot of time like messing around, doing what normal college kids do. And you were like, I think I'm going to get my real estate license.
Yes. So, well, disclosure, I had fun in college. I was in a fraternity. Disclosure on top of the disclosure, I was in the middle of COVID. So I had a year and a half of college that was not college. It was online. Then I graduated early. So I really had about 2 actual years of college. But I went into real estate very similarly as to why I went into the furniture world. It is cheap to get into. You pay $300, $400 to get your license. And it really is not the hardest thing in the world. If you're 18 and have a pulse, you can take the exam, you can take the course. It's 70 hours long. So I took it over one summer, that freshman year of college going into sophomore year. And my mom was a real estate agent. She had her license. Same. Yes. Okay. So now we're the same person.
Because she was always trying to convince me to get my real estate license. My brother got his. He also studied entrepreneurship. And so she was always like, oh, Maddie, you should get your real estate license. And I was like, I have no interest in being a realtor. But from your perspective, it's kind of a life hack, because you're right. You can be 18 and you can start to learn the foundations of entrepreneurship through real estate.
And that's exactly what I did. And so it is, and I always preach, I mean, any kind of sales, I mean, I know that you know this better than anyone. Everyone works in sales. If you work and create a podcast, you have to convince people to come and join your podcast and take the time to actually sit down and do this. So it taught me so much. But so I guess, back up. So my mom had been a real estate agent for about a year. So I went and got my license just out of curiosity. I thought that it could be something I could do on the side. It's obviously what I think a lot of us in the United States hope to invest in, or at least own a house at some point. So it could be a good thing to learn about. And I never really thought that I would spend that much time in it. The one thing that really caught my eye at the time, being 18, or I guess 19 once I had gotten my license, was, I mean, you can make just a ridiculous amount of money. And especially at that age, for having no real barrier to entry, the upside is massive. And so my thought was originally, I'll get my real estate license, do this on the side, save all the money I'll make, so when I graduate college, I could start something else and have a little bit of a cushion. And so I definitely, I fell off the deep end, and I did not think that I would like real estate originally as much as I did. But really, what I loved, and I mean, this is probably why your mom is telling you to get your real estate license, because I'm going to go off on a cliff here. You probably like talking to people and hanging out with people. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, that is 90% of what real estate is. It's being there to pick up the phone and get yelled at by every person that is upset with you, from the lender that needs documents, the attorney that needs documents, a home buyer that's stressed, a seller that's stressed. And if you are good with people and can sit and talk and be a sounding board, you are 10,000 miles above everyone else. And then really, especially being in sales, and the one thing that for some reason I've been gifted with is that the work aspect of it, I've never had an issue with. Doing the long hours, being excited to just sit down and do the boring stuff, which is a personality trait that I'm happy to have.
Totally.
That paid off. So that was my somewhat foray into real estate, I would say.
Yeah, I think it was what I want to touch on that's really important that you said is that everyone is a salesperson. Like, I think this is such a foundational concept that was drilled into me at such a young age, because my mom was in commercial real estate. My brother's an entrepreneur. My dad's not, but he will agree with this. And it's true. Like, it doesn't matter what industry you're in or what your business is. If you have a business, you're a salesperson. Like, whether you're selling a product or your services, like, you have to be able to communicate your business's value propositions and competitive differentiators more effectively than the other person or your competitors, because that's how you'll get people to spend time with you. And like, I don't mean to say be disingenuous or like be slimy, but you do have to be able to communicate effectively and genuinely tell people like why you're personally excited about your product or service. And then that's really what I think resonates well. But at the end of the day, it's all sales.
Well, and what I think is so powerful about sales is exactly what you hit about, is that it's just communication and understanding people's problems. Like what movie is it that everyone loves? Sell me this, Wolf of Wall Street, the whole entire sell me this pen thing. That's like the worst example of sales ever, because immediately everyone's reaction is to start talking about how excellent this pen is, why you need it in your life. And that's the exact opposite of what you should do. If anyone ever asks you this in an interview, don't talk about the pen. Start asking questions about the person, whether they need to write, what they're working on, or anything like that. Start to understand the individual. And again, why plan B for your life needs to be real estate. I agree with your mom. If you ever go down that route, it's because you would be good at working with people and interested in answering these or asking these questions. And that is the secret. And I mean, the biggest thing also about sales is that it's not necessarily selling that people need to think about. This is about, I mean, being confident enough to go out on a date with someone and be your true self and ask engaging conversations with people. Or if you're a 22-year-old in your first job, actually being confident to walk into a meeting and talk about this pitch deck or whatever it is that you're working on. And so that's where I think that the good part of real estate really stuck with me, is that the importance of communication, the importance of actually being interested in asking questions and wanting to help people solve their problems. Because ultimately that's all it is problem solving and communication.
Yes. Yeah. I think the confidence is such a good point too. And I feel like it wasn't something I understood for a very long time, like up until recently. I think I always understood confidence to be not like a inflated version of myself, because I always felt that I was really confident. But when I started to understand myself better and I started to pay more attention and be like really true and honest with myself about who I was, what I wanted, where I wanted to be in
Yeah.
the future, I think that's where the confidence came from, because it was
Mm.
almost like you don't want to be confident in that you want everyone to say yes to you, but it's also like it's okay if somebody says no, because you inherently know that that opportunity is not the best for you, and you can say like that's okay, I honestly don't need it because I know what I'm looking for out of life, and if these paths don't align, you're like that actually works out better for me. And I feel like and entrepreneurship in general is really like a self-exploration experiment,
Mm.
and you start to really gain confidence in yourself the more time you spend solving a problem, because you become an expert in that space and you become an expert in like your customers' needs. And it's like once you master that sense of self-security, because you're like, I'm on the right path. I think entrepreneurs specifically always feel this way as long as they're building something, married with like an obsession with a problem space, like you're good to go.
But I completely agree, and I think that the biggest thing is that it's a journey, and this takes
Mm-hmm.
time,
Yeah.
and especially like I guess I'll end the story. So at the end of my real estate career, I had started a firm and had spent the last 4 years in North Carolina, and then I followed the dream that I had had since I had got my license, moved to Manhattan in New York City, and started selling real estate up there, and I hated it. I decided that I didn't want to be up there. I didn't want to be in real estate anymore. And ultimately, that's what led to what I'm doing right now. But
What
it
did that moment
just,
look like for you? I'm so curious.
yeah, it was a complete 180. And I mean, if I had to go back in time, obviously, I think I would have flushed out a little bit more. If I'm not really enjoying North Carolina real estate, or I have the firm where I'm doing the things that I enjoy a lot more than just sales, I'm probably not going to like New York City.
Yeah.
But hindsight is 2020. I had to flush it out of my system and go up there, and it was the best thing that I ever did to at least get it out of my system.
Yeah.
But point being of that, when I had completely inversed my life, didn't know what I was going to do, didn't know what I wanted to pursue, it really did take a notch down in the confidence and in that ability to feel like I know what direction I'm going in, which, I mean, we could go on for hours on figuring out who you are, what you want to do, and how you actually do that. Because that, I think, is the hardest thing in the world to do, especially for people that are our age and just trying to figure this game of life out.
Totally. Yeah. I think I spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff because I think we're surrounded so often by unhappy individuals. And I think that truly just stems from not being true to yourself, not being honest about what you want, because we're expected to acquiesce to the needs and wants of others to the point where we're like stifling ourselves in the process. And you have to really find that sweet spot between being like a really kind, generous human being while maintaining your boundaries and being and making decisions that fulfill you and that are like aligned with who you are. But I feel like it's like a journey of the late 20s, like 30s situation. It's just like with time, because I was like you, where I always had to try everything. Like, even if somebody said it wasn't going to work out or it wasn't going to be a good idea, like I had to know for myself. I totally would have
Mm-hmm.
also moved to New York in your situation and like had to at least take the dream off the box to say that I did
Yeah.
it. And, like
Yeah.
prove to myself really truly that it wasn't what I wanted. But it's always like I think it's always a good thing. Like it's one of those things where in your career you're going to try a bunch of different stuff, and if you don't like it, that's just as important to find out if you do, because then you can take it off your list and you can be like, okay, well, what else? So I guess then when you got back after New York and you were like, okay, real estate's not for me, what did you do?
Yeah, so I knew, and again, if I could go back and hug my 18-year-old self, I would. So because I spent the 4 years in real estate, I saved all of the money that I made throughout my
Nice.
entire career, just because I knew I am either going to want to pursue something else or I'll invest it back in the business if I want to stay into real estate. And so I knew I had the ability to at least wait a little bit and figure out what I was going to do. And so I did some digging as to what other businesses I wanted to start, anything along those lines. I had worked on a few different ideas over about a 3-month long span. And I'm the kind of person that since I was probably 15, have just kept on my notes app just like business ideas and things that pop up and other things. So I knew I had a list of things that I might want to pursue, but when I sat down and really started to think, the idea of a nonprofit just kept coming up over and over and over again. If I was to really, and again, I think this is what we were just talking about, the fact that it just kept coming up over and over again, that was a sign for me that I had to at least flush it out a little bit and see if this is something I actually wanted to pursue. And of course, I went off the deep end again, and it was a good decision this time instead of New York. But I at least had to spend a few weeks fleshing out a business model, fleshing out an idea, and then, of course, it takes on this full body and evolves, and that's another story in itself. But it was a combination of a little bit of soul searching, but I, of course, and I mean, how lucky am I to have been set up in a situation of I had the financial resources to not have to freak out and go and get a 9-to-5. And again, I mean, it's just the luckiest thing that I could have ever done. So a little bit of soul searching, a little bit of homework I had already done I knew that nonprofit might be something I wanted to do. And then finally, after, I mean, again, just time, it fleshed itself out. And now here we are almost 2 years later.
I feel like doing a nonprofit is such an unusual choice for an entrepreneur. Like, I don't think that a lot of entrepreneurs, I mean, listen, like, I love entrepreneurs. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurialism, but I think a large majority of them are always like, I want to start a business that makes a buttload of money. And I'm really curious to get your thoughts on like why you decided to go nonprofit, because I personally think that it's really interesting, and I have my own like feelings about nonprofit where I think that they could be really interesting for a business model specifically. So I'm curious to know why you decided to go that route.
So I don't always love telling the story because it isn't the person that I want to be. But part of why I went into real estate was to make money. And I mean, it paid off down the road. And so the story that I tell, just as the example, and I mean, the point of what I'm saying here is I had gotten a taste of making money. And the story that I always tell was I vividly remember my junior year of high school. I had a closing one morning at 7:30 a.m. I had an 8 o'clock class, so I had to skip that class. But I remember going to this closing, and it was almost a $2 million home. And I would have made that morning before my first class how much that professor would have made. And I just did not care. That was not something that I was interested in. It didn't make me feel any better. I went and I put it in the bank, and I was like, I guess I'll put this into savings or invest it. I'm not a materialistic person, fortunately. I have no interest in going and blowing that money or doing anything along those lines. And so I always tell that story because I want people to realize, flush out the idea of what money means to you, because you and I are in the same boat. We love entrepreneurship, and I talk to entrepreneurs all the time, and they all want this giant cash out and this huge payday. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I just want to push people as to why and what that might be, because if you're just going to blow it, there's some deeper and further digging that you need to do before you spend 60 years working in finance or whatever it is to retire and not be happy with what you've done with your life.
That's such a good point. It's so important that people hear that, because the reason that I'm obsessed with entrepreneurialism is because I'm obsessed with the build. I love creating and like building something from the ground up and watching it grow into something completely different and so amazing, and that you can step back and be like, holy shit, I did that, and like, I think entrepreneurialism is the lifelong pursuit of that, in my opinion. And that's why I would never get sick of it. And it's like, I've always been very like achievement oriented. So I was always like very high achieving. I was always like chasing the next big thing to add to my resume, I guess. And similar to, I think, how you were with money, is you realized that like that wasn't long-term fulfilling. Because I think for people who are obsessed with money, like you're always just chasing the next dollar. And similar to me, like I was always just chasing the next achievement in order to like feel good about myself. And that's, I think, when I realized like I do absolutely love build and I love like projects. I think that's what gets me excited, from taking something from nothing to something. And entrepreneurialism is just that, but on a bigger scale. And I think like once you realize that and you step back and you discover what your true motives are, like that's when you can really hit the ground running.
Well, and it's such a superpower for you that has taken the time to realize that. Because people will spend their whole lives trying to accumulate as much wealth as possible and then either not have the time to spend it or realize that it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, again, talk about how lucky I am to have realized that early on. Because it definitely, I mean, it's clearly been a fundamental part of who I am. And I mean, the biggest thing, and I tell people this all the time, I would say 95 to 99% of people that I've talked to that say I want to start a nonprofit, I almost always say, wait, it's not time. You don't even need to start a nonprofit. It might not be the right thing to even do, because there are so many different ways to not have to jump through the hoops of what it is to run a nonprofit, to deal with all of the stuff, for lack of better words. And you can make an impact in so many different ways. And I mean, it's just outstanding what people can do with for-profit companies and giving. And starting a nonprofit, you don't have to go off the deep end. You can start by donating $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever it is. There are just so many things that you have to do. You don't need to jump off this deep end. But what I really love are, I mean, conversations like this of people that are more mission-driven, passion-driven, and it's not just about as many zeros as you can have on your network or whatever it is, because it just gets, to me, that's just boring. But I guess that is just me. So I could be wrong.
No, I'm with you. Like, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about nonprofit, and I kind of want to like talk about it a little bit more in depth about how it works for you, because I think there is a misconception where nonprofits are seen as like, for lack of a better word, like poor. Like they don't have the resources or the ability to grow to the same level or do the same things as a for-profit company can. And I think the misconception is that just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean that you're not making money. Like you're able to turn a profit in the nonprofit space. It's just where those funds are then being allocated. Like I think the big aha moment for me when I was starting to think about how I would want to run the structure of like my own, you know, I'm a co-founder of a tech platform, and we're like working through the initial stages of how we would want this business to function. And something that my co-founder and I were really aligned on is we want to be goal oriented and like mission driven instead of profit oriented. And when you start to think about what, like how I would imagine it is that as the company grows, so do my employees, right? Like as we grow, technically all of the people who make the company run, their wages should also grow, because like that just makes sense. You know, as we scale, everyone else should scale up with us. And when you think about that, all it means is that you're taking all of the profit that your company is making and reinvesting it into the business, which like for my mind, you're like, duh, like that makes sense. But really, like not a lot of other companies operate that way. And then that begs the question of why. And you're like, truly why? And it's, the answer is because a lot of like the high level C-suites just want to get paid more. They don't care whether like every single employee is growing with the company. Like they're just not invested, I think, from a human perspective in the company itself. So when I thought about it that way, I was like, oh shit, like there's so many, like, to me, it was more just like a break free of the chains of the status quo to say, like, really, we can do whatever we want. It's our business. And that means that we can run it however we want.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that I would say, especially for public companies and large companies like that, At that stage, I would almost argue that they need to be as forefront and forward on the fact that they are here to make money. It is ultimately a public company's job is to make money for their shareholders. And I would argue almost that I wish that some people in some for-profit companies would be more blunt about that. We're going to try and make as much money as possible, and we don't care about what we're giving to our employees and benefits and salaries and how we're greenwashing and giving back to the environment and everything like that. We're here to make money. And I wish that people would be a little bit more forward with that. And we wouldn't get in this gray area of, oh, we're actually treating our employees well. We're actually giving back to the environment and the community and all of these things. Because then at least we know what you're doing. That's not a bad thing. People invest their money, hopefully as much as they can and all the time. And people want to see their net worth grow. And I understand that. What bothers me, and I think that what you're hinting on as well, is this gray area of what are we actually doing here? And I think that again comes down to nonprofit, for-profit, everything in between. But there's just so many moving parts. And again, we can go in so many different directions here, but I think it comes down to transparency and being, this is what we're actually doing and how we're communicating and what our goals are. And I mean, again, for a public company, ultimately that is you're trying to provide profits to your shareholders that have invested all of this money into you.
I think the big question that everyone listening is probably having in their minds is like, how hard is it to run a nonprofit? Like, do you feel like you're constantly drowning, or do you find it to be a very liberating experience? I'm also just personally curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So I'll back up and just give like a 30-second who we are and what we do.
Yes,
because I don't think we've done that yet. So I lead a tech nonprofit called myCharity. And myCharity, the easiest way to think about it is we are the better way to donate. We've created an online platform that makes donating easier, more informational, and more engaging. And our ultimate goal is to make donating something that the everyday individual loves. And so we'll dive in further into that. But to answer your question, the biggest thing that a lot of people don't realize when it is time to start a nonprofit, and I can say that because I did not realize this, is how expensive it is. You can file, I don't know every state, we're in North Carolina, so I'll talk about North Carolina here. You can spend $125 and fill out one page of paperwork, send it off to the Secretary of State, and you have your LLC, you're registered, you're good to go. To file for your nonprofit status, it is somewhere around, I think, $1,000 if you go that route. And that is just for the paperwork filing. The paperwork filing is around, it's a Form 1043, if you want to look this up in your spare time. It is such an extensive document, and I get it. If you're not paying taxes, the IRS wants to know what you're doing. You have to give like very detailed answers on what your activities are, 5 years of predicted financials. How are you gonna know that? So many different things of bylaws and an extensive. I mean, it's a very, very hefty and difficult document. And so the point of that is, I do not recommend anyone to attempt to fill this out themselves. You need to go and hire an attorney to do this. And so that's where this process, I mean, to just do the paperwork, get your bank accounts and everything set up, that's about $5,000 off the top, when you can do that for about $200 for a normal business filing and everything else. And you could figure that out yourself quite easily. And so that's the first problem with starting a nonprofit. It's expensive, it's confusing. And then the second thing is actually funding this thing and figuring out what you're going to do. We did something very special that a lot of nonprofits do not do, and we set ourselves up on a 100% model. So Maddie, if you go online and donate to any of our causes, we send 100% of your donations directly to the field. That means that for my salary, my rent, my marketing budget, my other team members, anything like that, that's a different bank account and a different budget. We don't touch it. It's the right thing to do for our model, and we want to give that power to our donors. But that means that for our fundraising, no matter how successful we are on this philanthropy side, we have to separately fundraise and spend a lot of time on this operations side. And so that makes our lives extremely difficult on the funding side. But the biggest thing is that if you start a nonprofit, grants are an easy way to get into it. And you can fill out a ton of different grants and get in and start to get funding. But there are so many hoops to jump through. They're very extensive. They often want to see 2 to 5 years of business background and financial statements and things like that. There are a handful of organizations that I've come across that will support newer nonprofits, but unfortunately, it's a very, very difficult business model to get into from my experience so far. We're very unique. We're about checking every box that a grant maker doesn't want to see. Being a grant making organization, a tech nonprofit, we're fundraising just for operational costs most of the time in these conversations. But no matter what, I've got 2 other businesses under my belt. And this has just been by far the hardest and most expensive thing. But for what we are trying to do and what other nonprofits would try to do, it is so worth it for the amount of impact and the homework that you do to set this up, because you might be able to move quicker on a for-profit company and start to generate revenue, but you will be in such a better place getting this firm base set as a nonprofit, and 10,000% worth it.
I assume that you guys do subscriptions for your free platform? Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we are only monthly subscriptions, so we don't even accept. You have to jump through some hoops and get deep into our website to make a one-time donation. So it's just monthly subscription, and that's another business decision. But really, I mean, what we're trying to do is get people to donate recurringly, even if it's only $5 a month. Get that muscle going.
Do you guys also do any like investment rounds also, or do you mostly do like fundraising events?
So we do everything. I run this company as much as I can like a for-profit in the activities that we do and everything that we're doing. So I think of all of our operational fundraising and rounds. I do as much as I can to really put my strengths at play. Yeah. And I think that unfortunately, which you kind of hinted on earlier, everyone thinks that this nonprofit playbook is much different than a for-profit playbook, and it does not need to be. The only thing that needs to change is what you're doing with the profits that you receive. You can't put them into your pocket, and that's the only difference. And it really is just a tax code and a way that you operate. No one owns a nonprofit. When it comes down to it, that is the only difference. And so we operate as much as we can by a for-profit playbook. We just handle money a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. I like how you said that, because I think that really like hammers home the point of the nonprofit. And I think you're smart to think about it like a for-profit, because really at the end of the day, there's no reason to be running it differently, especially when you think about doing like investing in seed rounds and stuff like that. I mean, it just is, it's kind of genius, because seed rounds, especially if like when planned efficiently, are highly effective. And that means that you're also not having to worry about doing it all the time. Instead, you're just going through like, phases or quarters where you're like in an investing round, and then you can sort of sustain and then like do it again and sustain and then do it again. What do you think how do you think about the future?
For the world, the company, for everything, for what?
Let's start with the company.
My vision for this is that I want us to be, Netflix is the example I always use. I want hundreds of millions of people to be donating month after month, even if it is, again, $5 to whatever causes that they care about and genuinely love donating. I want you to go to drinks with your friends and get a notification on your phone and see, Maddie, you planted 148 trees in Madagascar with your recent donation. Here's the photos, here's the videos, here's the GPS coordinates. Look at how amazing you are. And I'm not trying to blow smoke, because genuinely donating and making that impact is an amazing thing. And I have such an outstanding belief in human potential, that is how I really want this to go. Now, how long it takes to get there, I do not know. Fortunately, I'm a patient person, but I really do think, based off of what we're trying to do and grow and scale, I mean, I think within the next 5 years, we'll really have solidified who we are and what we're trying to do, have
Yeah.
really gotten comfortable with the fundraising, because that is
Mhm.
the hardest part is operations. I mean, right now, I've not paid myself in 2 years of doing this. So we're fundraising a small seed round to get myself and a few other employees, and then immediately going into some much, much bigger asks for multiple years, 10 plus employees, all the way up in 5 years. I hope that we have about a 70-person team, depending on how quickly we can get there. So, I mean, ultimately, that's our goal, is that we want as many people donating as possible, but really doing it because they love it, not just because it's homework or a tax write-off. It needs to be a fulfilling process for every person involved.
Yeah, 100%. I think you and I are really aligned in terms of mission and values. Like, I'm also of the same belief where I think that as a species, we have an incredible potential for change, especially right now. Like, my favorite thing is to really think about how we don't have to do things the way that they have been traditionally done to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, many people have found success through similar routes, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way. And I think as a society, we have the opportunity now to look at where things are and where they're going, and then make a collective decision to say, no, we really want to do something different. And then I think it's up to the unique individuals who are bold enough to try. And I find that most of the time, those people are entrepreneurs to like really think about it and do something different. And thinking about the amount of I think it's an interesting route when you think about like what your platform is able to do, right? Because if all of us are collectively paying attention to certain causes and
Mm-hmm.
actively working to solve them, that demonstrates our collective desire to actually solve problems that we genuinely believe in. And if that is the basis that we're going towards, then there's really nothing that we can't do. And I want to jump into this a little because I really want to, I think that like what one of your differentiators that I find really intriguing is your level of transparency to allow people who are donating to causes like really see where their money is going. I think is so smart because as of right now, like I know back in the day, those ASPCA commercials, they got me. You know, they showed me a puppy in a cage and I was like, God damn it.
Yeah.
Now I have to send money. But when you send money, you have no clue where it's going. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe they send you a t-shirt in the mail. Maybe you get an email once in a while about like a raid that they did and they saved a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
animals. But truly, like you have no frickin' clue where your money is going. And I want to did that ability to get that level of transparency come from the causes that you partner with? Is that like one of the sort of like baseline things that you tell companies where you're like, hey, listen, we want to have you on our platform, but in order to do that, we require this level of transparency. And they're like, sweet, we're into it.
Yeah. So how we work, again, kind of taking a step back here. So our users go online, they pick the causes that they care about. We have 25 different options ranging from cancer to sea turtles. You donate monthly. We take 100% of those donations to the field. And then users get photos, videos, GPS coordinates, financial report, and field notes proving down to the penny exactly what their donations did.
Cool.
And so how we work, we take your money, Maddie's donations. Let's say that you only donate to cancer, just to make things easy, $10 a month. So every month, $10 comes in, $10 comes in, $10 comes in. We pool that money together with other myCharity users that are supporting cancer. And once we hit a goal, we'll say $1,000, we make a grant to a pre-vetted, pre-approved partner in the field. These, I mean, and again, talk about transparency. We do the homework for you. So we go through, we look at their financials, we connect with their executive leadership team, and they get approved by us. It's a process that, again, individuals don't have the time and energy to do this themselves.
Yeah.
And so we're happy to do it. And so we make grants to these partners in the field. And within those grants, that's where we require these photos, the videos, everything that they send back to us and are ultimately just saying, look at what we did. And so I understand nonprofits do not have some nonprofits do not have the time, the energy, the resources to take a $10 donation and report back to you and say, this is what your money has done. I get it. They need to be doing cancer research. They need to be doing whatever it is that they're doing. But I do think that this standard needs to be raised up a little bit for nonprofits, and not just sending an annual report and bunching together all of this. If you do even get an annual report, a lot of the times it's a receipt and that's it, and there's no communication back and forth. So really that's how we work, and the process you hit on, and I'll let you steer where you want this to go of transparency, but it just came out of my personal frustration because it seemed so hard to answer the most basic question of what did my donation do? Yeah. And it just blew my mind that that's the general norm for the world before we had gotten into it.
Yeah, and I think, frankly, there's a lot of stigma, especially right now, about charity transparency. Like, you think about how many charities are out there that are funded by like incredibly wealthy individuals, and you come to discover that that's just a way for them to make more money. And like, you know, you find out all these horror stories about charities that didn't do anything and just basically stole money from people with the guy under the guise of doing something better for the humanity. And I think like, I don't know. I think maybe our generation is not as inclined to donate as they used to be. And especially with social media, like, it's all about image, you know, and saying like, oh, are you dedicated to this cause? If you're not, like, you're going to get canceled. And I think what I'm trying to say is that the space is ripe for change because there has been so much disruption over the past, 30, 40 years. And I think it's about time for somebody to come in and be like, no, obviously it's important to actually solve the problems that really probably should be solved. Like, cancer is a problem that we should solve. Like, it is 2024. We have great technology. Like, why do we care about what bag someone is wearing? We probably, imagine if we'd put the energy as a collective into actually solving these big problems, what we could really accomplish as individuals. But I think you're right. Like, the space had a lot of stigma. There was a lot of challenges about donating in a way that feels impactful as opposed to just saying you did it just to say you did it.
Well, and I think that on top of that realization, to talk about a little bit of what you were mentioning on a collective impact, what really it really angered me of doing the math, of figuring out of what we could do with the amount of money that people are spending. And Netflix is the example I always use because it's back here. I don't know if you've read Thirst by Scott Harrison, but Charity Water is one of my favorite nonprofit organizations in the world. And they always talk about numbers and how $40 can give one person clean drinking water. There are 780 million people without clean drinking water globally. They don't have access to it. They're walking to go and drink dirty water out of lakes, streams, wells, whatever it is. Netflix made $34 billion last year. It would cost 31 and some change $billion to solve the global water crisis and give 780 million people clean drinking water that have never had access to it before. They could do it in 1 year. And this is really where I started to catalyze and want to push forward with myCharity because A, people don't know that. B, people don't realize that $10 a month can make that much of a difference. And if we could do that, that would be the greatest humanitarian achievement in history without any questions. And then you start to think of what if we got these numbers, we could easily start to do a handful of cancer trials each year that would result in a strain being solved. I mean, it starts to roll and starts to change, but I do understand that there needs to be some steps to get to there. People need to actually think that their money is making a difference. They want to see their impact. They want to feel like they're actually making a difference. And again, I don't want to say that nonprofits are doing a bad job necessarily. I just think that nonprofits need help. There are so many outstanding organizations that are underfunded and overworked, and they just need some extra funding because how nonprofits work, and we were talking about this earlier with grants, there's only 1.8 million, there's 1.8 million nonprofits in the United States, and only such a small fraction of those are grant-making organizations. Every single nonprofit is fighting for the same money from the same foundations and the same wealthy individuals. So it's so difficult to get funding. And so what we're trying to do with getting individuals to donate month after month is generating this new market share where we can have a brand new pool of money coming from individuals that are left underrepresented because they don't have enough money to support and are worth supporting on these nonprofits. And so it really is this massive, giant positive feedback loop that I cannot wait to see what the impact is. And selfishly, I think it is just so exciting to get those notifications and see what your money is actually doing, because it is so different in seeing, and it really is like an aha moment for our donors and for myself. But that's enough smoke blowing of our platform.
No, I think to your point, it's true. I think human beings are herd animals, right? Like we're a collective people. And therefore, I really believe that in our DNA, we are made to be fulfilled by helping others. Like, I mean, it's a cliche for a reason, because it's true. And that like the most fulfilling thing you can do is by helping somebody else. And I also think that entrepreneurialism ties into that, because we're all obsessed with solving someone else's problems, whether they're our own problems and we solve them for ourselves and then by proxy, several thousand million other people. But truly at the end of the day, like we want to help somebody in some way, shape, or form. What that form takes is dependent on your business, but we all have a desire to help other people. And I think it's just about changing the way in which we go about doing it now on a collective scale, which I think is genius. And I think it's why your platform makes so much sense. And I'm like shocked, because it's just one of those things where I'm like, why has nobody done this yet?
Yeah. Well, and it is, unfortunately, the answer to that question is there's no money to be made. I mean, again, we're a nonprofit. And as much as that sucks and stings, that is a very easy and understandable reason as to why. Well, understandable isn't the right word, but that's a very clear reason as to why. If this was a huge profitable venture, I think it would have been done before. I will say what we do with the financial sorting and keeping everyone's donations in order, that's a very intense process. If you go online and donate right now, it's almost a 150-step process in our back end just to make sure that your money is going to the right cause and your account is set up. So it does take some time, but it's not, I mean, there are so many way more difficult projects that for-profits are taking on. And it is, that's what I do think is one of the bigger shames, is that this could have been thought of 25 years ago very easily. And I mean, in the conversations that I've been having with funders and other people that are just interested in our work, it's very clear that other people have tried to develop a model like this and have tried to make a very good consumer product for donating. And it just has not worked out, because it's the system that we live in of foundations want to see that you're really doing specific cancer research, or you're a college student trying to do one specific thing, and they want to fund that just because it's in their wheelhouse. It's much easier, and they don't want to write grants to overhead. And that is, I think, we can get into the overhead myth. That's one of the biggest downfalls of the nonprofit world, of that nonprofits need to be underfunded and overworked. And that's, I know that we are going to have a lot of future press and problems isn't the right word, for the amount of money that we're going to pay our employees and the amount of money that we spend on tech. Because I think that nonprofit employees should be the smartest people in the world.
Yes.
And they're working on the most important problems. And I know that people are going to be upset about that. And that has nothing to do with me being the CEO or the executive director and me getting a massive salary. That is that I think that we need the best talent. MBAs should be coming to work for us instead of going straight to their consulting route, or in everything within there. And
no,
so
you and
that's
I
one of the
100% aligned. Like,
we're on the same boat.
We truly are on the same boat. It's like, if you are working hard and you're doing good work to solve a problem, why should you not be compensated thusly? It's like teachers and doctors and like other key workers, farmers, for example, I feel like should have way higher salaries than what they do. But this is like, I mean, at the end of the day, this conversation gives me a lot of excitement because it means that like there are so many of us out there who are on the same page and who can understand that there is work to be done about changing the foundation of how our society operates, and it's actually possible, and like we're out here working to do it. And it's just, I think it's great. And like frankly, I think it's funny, like, there are some people who are like, oh, I was born in the wrong era. Like, I was absolutely born in the right era. I was born for this era to like make a change, to do something better. And also, I love Amazon. Like, I would not have survived in the 1800s.
It would have been a lot harder to get whatever you needed, for sure. But no, I agree. I think that, I mean, the biggest thing and the whole entire bet of myCharity is that I believe so heavily in the ability of one individual person to make a difference in the world. And I know that what we talk about is heavily donation based, but you don't have to donate. You don't have to join our platform to make a difference in the world. You can start tomorrow by holding the door for someone, telling someone that they look good or you like their shoes or whatever it is, and just start to make a positive impact that slowly adds up. Obviously, I think that if you want to make a big difference in the world in whatever causes that you care about, financially making a contribution is one of the best things to do. But I mean, again, the consensus of all of this, if you don't know what your money is going towards, save it. Go spend it on yourself, because there's no reason to just light money on fire.
Yeah.
But I think that there has never been a better time to try and solve whatever problem is that you want to, with how much easier it is to start a business, how amazing it is to connect with people. I mean, we're however many miles, we're 3 time zones apart right now filming this interview. It's just, there's never been a better time to connect with people, to work on amazing problems. And there's never been such an outstanding pool of talent getting into, especially the nonprofit world. That's hands down my favorite part of the job, is meeting people like you, meeting the people in the field who are doing the outstanding work day in and day out, who are way braver than me. I mean, when it comes down to it, I'm just a glorified fundraiser who's just come up with a new way to do it. I walk around in a suit all day. There are people fighting for refugee rights and fighting for climate change rights. And I mean, there's so much amazing work going on in the world that needs to be supported. And I think that that is the ultimate consensus of what we're trying to do, is that one person can truly change the world.
Yeah, I frankly think that's the perfect mic drop for the end of the episode. I think it's a really great place to close. Like, let's leave people on that note so then they can go out and do just that.
Well, perfect then. I didn't even plan that. But Maddie, thank you so much. This has been such a joy. I'm excited to stay in touch and hear about what you're working on and see if there's anything that I can do to help, because I'm excited for you and excited for what's to come.
Oh, thank you.